He walked slowly through the crowded street, his stomach empty and his heart heavy. The city was loud and full of people, but he felt completely invisible among them. For days, he had eaten almost nothing. His clothes were worn, his shoes were dusty, and his face showed clear signs of struggle. He wasn't lazy or careless. Life had simply pushed him into a corner where survival itself felt like an impossible challenge. He stopped in front of a small cafe near the road. It wasn't fancy, just a simple place where working people came for cheap food. The smell of warm bread and soup reached his nose, making his hunger stronger. He stood there for a long moment, fighting with his pride. He knew he had no money, but his body was weak and he couldn't walk any further. With a deep breath, he stepped inside. The cafe was busy. Cups clinked, people talked, and the sound of cooking filled the air. He chose a corner table and sat quietly, hoping no one would notice him. His eyes moved over the menu, even though he knew he couldn't afford anything on it. A young waitress noticed him from across the room. She had kind eyes and a tired smile. She had seen people like him before, people who were struggling but trying to hide it. When she came to his table, she asked politely what he would like to order. His voice was low and shaky when he spoke. He told her the truth that he had no money and hadn't eaten for days. He said he would leave if it was a problem, expecting to be met with anger or rejection. Instead, the waitress paused and looked at him carefully. She saw honesty in his eyes, not excuses. She told him to wait and walked back to the counter. Without telling anyone, she paid for a simple meal using her own money. It wasn't a big meal, just soup, bread, and tea, but to him, it meant everything. When she placed the food on his table, his eyes filled with tears. He ate slowly, enjoying every single bite. The warmth of the food gave him strength, but the kindness touched him even more deeply. No one had shown him care like this in a very long time. As he ate, they talked quietly. He told her about his past, his dreams, and how he wanted to become successful one day. He said he didn't want to be poor forever. He wanted to build something of his own. The waitress listened patiently. She didn't laugh or doubt him. She encouraged him and told him to never give up. Her words were simple, but they felt powerful. He felt seen and respected, not judged. When he finished eating, he stood up. He had nothing to give her in return, no money, no gift, only words. But those words came from deep in his heart. He looked at her and said that one day he would become rich. He promised that when that day came, he would return and marry her. The waitress smiled gently. She didn't take the promise seriously. She thought it was just something people say when they're emotional. Still, the words stayed with her. There was something sincere about the way he said them, something honest. He thanked her again and walked out of the cafe, disappearing into the busy street. She watched him go, wondering what would become of him. She returned to her work, believing that this moment would soon be forgotten. But for him, that meal and that kindness became a turning point. As he walked away, he felt something he hadn't felt in a long time: hope. He promised himself that he would work harder than ever, that he would remember the woman who fed him when he had nothing. Neither of them knew it yet, but that small act of kindness had planted a seed that would grow through years of struggle, patience, and destiny. And one day, it would bring them face to face again. Leaving the cafe didn't magically fix his life. The road ahead was long and filled with hardship. He walked for hours that night, with nothing but the memory of a warm meal and a stranger's kindness. As the city lights faded, reality came rushing back. Hunger, uncertainty, and the gnawing fear of tomorrow. He moved from place to place, taking any small job he could find. Some days, he'd work on construction sites. Other days, he'd clean shops or carry heavy loads at the market. The pay was low and the work was exhausting. Many nights, he slept in crowded shared rooms or cheap shelters, and sometimes he slept outside. But he refused to beg again. That one act of kindness had given him a sense of dignity, and he was determined not to lose it. Failure seemed to follow him. He tried small business ideas that didn't take off. He trusted the wrong people and lost the little money he had managed to save. There were moments when he felt completely broken, when his body ached and his mind told him to just give up. But every time weakness crept in, he remembered the waitress and the promise he had made to himself. That memory was a quiet fire inside him, pushing him forward. Meanwhile, the waitress continued her simple life. She went to the same cafe every day, served customers, and smiled even when she was exhausted. Her life wasn't easy either. She had family responsibilities, a low wage, and dreams she kept hidden away. Sometimes, during a quiet moment at the cafe, she'd think about the young man she helped. She wondered if he was okay, if he had eaten, if he was safe. She never expected to see him again. Years passed slowly, changing both of them. He learned hard lessons about life, patience, discipline, and trust. He started reading books borrowed from others, educating himself about business and finance. Knowledge became his new strength. He saved every penny he could, choosing struggle over comfort. There were nights he wanted to quit and go back to a simpler existence. But then he remembered the gnawing hunger, the feeling of helplessness, and how one small act of kindness changed everything. He told himself that success wasn't just about money. It was about becoming someone who keeps their word. The waitress also changed with time. Her kindness remained, but life had made her more cautious. She'd seen too many people make promises they never kept. She stopped believing in big words and focused on getting through each day. Still, deep in her heart, the memory of that promise remained, like a forgotten letter she could never bring herself to throw away. One evening, after a long shift, she sat alone by the cafe window, watching people walk by. She wondered how life could change so fast for some, while staying the same for others. She gave a sad smile and went back to work, believing her story was already written. But for him, things were finally starting to shift. A small opportunity worked out. He partnered with someone who saw his honesty and determination and believed in him. It was a risk, but he took it. He worked day and night, learning from his mistakes instead of fearing them. Money didn't come quickly, but progress did. For the first time, he felt a sense of control over his future. With every step forward, his confidence grew, but he never let success erase his past. He constantly reminded himself of where he came from. As his life improved, the memory of the cafe became clearer, not weaker. The smell of the soup, the sound of the cups, the kind eyes of the waitress seed all stayed with him. He knew that if he ever truly succeeded, he would return. Not to show off his wealth, but to honor a promise made during his darkest hour. Both of them continued on their separate paths, completely unaware that destiny was quietly at work, bringing their two stories closer with every passing year. The wait was long, the struggle was real, but this story was far from over. Time tested him in ways he never expected. By the time the first real opportunity appeared, he was no longer the desperate young man who had walked into a cafe hungry. He had become sharper, quieter, and more disciplined. Life had taught him to listen more than he spoke, and to work even when no one was watching. The small business he started did not bring instant success. At first, it barely survived. Some months he earned just enough to pay rent and buy food. Other months he earned nothing at all. But this time, he did not panic. He treated every problem like a lesson, learning where he went wrong and how to fix it next time. He began to understand people, markets, and timing. He learned that success wasn't just about effort, but also about patience and smart choices. While others chased fast money, he focused on building something stable, something that could last. This mindset slowly set him apart. Long hours became his normal. He woke up before sunrise and slept late into the night. His friends enjoyed small comforts, but he chose sacrifice. He remembered the cold nights, the hunger, and the embarrassment of having nothing. Those memories kept him grounded and focused. As time passed, his work started gaining attention. Clients trusted him because he kept his word. Partners respected him because he was honest. Slowly, money began to flow, not in large amounts at first, but steady and reliable. For him, that stability felt like real success. Yet with progress came a deep loneliness. He had no one to share his victories with, no family to celebrate his growth, no partner to support him emotionally. Sometimes, in quiet moments, his thoughts returned to the waitress. He wondered if she still worked at the cafe, if she remembered him, if she had ever believed in his promise. Meanwhile, the waitress watched life move forward around her. Customers came and went, seasons changed, and the cafe remained the same. She grew more mature, more thoughtful, but her life stayed simple. She had chances to leave the cafe, but responsibility always pulled her back. She believed that some people were meant to dream, and others were meant to endure. Back in his world, success began to accelerate. One smart decision led to another. He expanded his business, invested wisely, and avoided risky shortcuts. Within a few years, his name started appearing in business circles. People who once ignored him now sought his advice. With wealth came temptation. Luxury, comfort, and attention surrounded him. But he remained careful. He remembered that money could change people, and he did not want to forget who he truly was. He continued to live simply, focusing on purpose rather than display. One evening, while reviewing old notes, he found a small reminder he had written years ago. A simple sentence about kindness and promises. Reading it stirred something deep inside him. He realized that while he had achieved financial success, there was one unfinished chapter in his life. He knew then that becoming rich was never the final goal. The real test was whether he could return to where it all began, face his past with humility, and prove that gratitude still mattered. As he looked out of his office window at the sprawling city lights, he made a quiet decision. He would go back. Not as a man seeking praise, but as someone honoring a debt of the heart. The cafe, the waitress, and the promise waited silently in his thoughts. What he didn't know was that his return would not only surprise her, but also change both of their lives forever. The rise was complete, but the story was about to reach its most emotional moment. The morning he decided to return felt different from all the others. He woke up early, not because of work, but because of memories that refused to stay quiet. For years he had imagined this moment, yet now that it was real, his heart felt heavy. He chose simple clothes, nothing expensive, nothing that showed his wealth. He did not want money to speak for him. As his car moved through familiar streets, the city looked smaller than he remembered. Buildings had changed, shops had closed, new faces filled old places. But deep inside, he felt like the same hungry young man walking with empty pockets. The closer he got, the faster his heart beat. The cafe was still there, small and modest, standing bravely against time. The paint on the walls was faded, the signs slightly broken, but the smell of food drifted into the air just like before. He stopped outside and took a long breath. Years of struggle, success, and waiting led to this moment. Inside, the cafe was busy. Cups clinked, voices mixed, and life moved on without knowing his story. He sat at a corner table, the same place where he once sat hungry and ashamed. He ordered the same simple meal, soup and bread. The waitress moved between tables. Older now, her face carrying lines of experience. Her smile was calmer, quieter, shaped by years of hard work. When she reached his table, she looked at him briefly, polite but distant. She did not recognize him. He watched her carefully, noticing how kindness still lived in her actions. The way she spoke softly to customers, the way she helped without complaint. His chest tightened with emotion. He waited patiently. When she placed the food in front of him, he thanked her gently. Their eyes met for a second. Something familiar passed between them, but it disappeared as quickly as it came. She moved on to the next table. He ate slowly, letting the memories return. The cold night, the hunger, the kindness that saved him. Everything felt alive again. When he finished, he stood up and walked to the counter. He spoke softly, reminding her of a night long ago. A hungry young man, a secret meal, and a promise spoken with trembling hope. At first, she looked confused. Her mind searched through years of faces and moments. Then suddenly, her expression changed. Her eyes widened and her hand trembled slightly. She remembered, not the face, but the feeling. The sincerity, the honesty in his voice. He smiled, not proudly, but gratefully. He told her how that meal gave him strength, how her kindness became the reason he refused to give up. He told her that he kept his promise alive through every failure and success. Tears filled her eyes. She never expected this moment, never believed the promise would return dressed as reality. She listened silently, her heart overwhelmed. Other customers watched quietly, sensing something important was happening. The cafe felt still, like time had slowed. He did not show her money or success. He showed her gratitude. He told her that wealth meant nothing if promises were forgotten. He told her he had come back not to impress, but to honor his word. She struggled to speak, emotions mixed inside her, surprise, disbelief, and something warmer, something long buried. She finally whispered that she never expected him to return. He replied simply that he never forgot. That moment changed everything. Two lives that once crossed briefly were now standing face to face again. The past met the present with honesty and humility. Outside, the city continued its noise, unaware that inside a small cafe, destiny was unfolding. The return was complete, but the final promise still waited to be fulfilled. She stood there quietly, her mind racing to catch up with the moment. Her hands rested on the familiar counter, but her eyes were locked on him, a face from a long-forgotten past. All those years of routine, of pouring coffee and taking orders, had never prepared her for this. A promise she'd once heard during a busy shift. A fleeting comment she'd barely registered had just walked back into her life. He asked if they could sit and talk. She could only nod, her voice caught in her throat. They found a small table by the window, a quiet corner away from the usual hum of the cafe. Suddenly, the place felt different, softer, as if the very walls held a memory of that day. He began to speak, his voice honest and clear, stripped of any pride. He told her about the long, hard years of struggle, the countless failures, the nights filled with doubt. He explained how that one simple meal she gave him became a turning point. How her unexpected kindness was the fuel he needed when his tank was completely empty. He admitted there were so many moments when giving up seemed like the only logical choice, but the memory of his promise to her, a promise to return successful, kept him going. She listened in stunned silence, her heart swelling with an emotion she couldn't name. It was overwhelming to realize she had been an unknowing participant in his journey, a silent partner in his fight. A simple act of kindness she barely remembered had completely altered the course of another person's life. Tears began to trace paths down her cheeks, not tears of sadness, but of the sheer, beautiful weight of the moment. Finally, she found her voice. She told him she never expected anything in return. She helped him because it felt like the right thing to do, not as an investment for a future reward. Life had taught her to give freely, without expectation. He nodded, a deep respect in his eyes. He understood, he said, but for him, a promise was a sacred thing. He explained that his drive to become successful was never just about the money. It was about becoming the kind of man who keeps his word, a man worthy of that long-ago kindness. From behind the counter, the cafe owner watched, sensing the significance of their quiet conversation. Other customers seemed to notice too, their voices lowering, granting the pair an unspoken privacy. The world outside rushed on, but inside that small cafe, time seemed to stand still. He reached into his pocket and placed a small, simple ring on the table. It wasn't flashy or extravagant, but it was elegant, chosen with care. He made it clear he wasn't there to pressure her, only to offer the choice he had promised all those years ago. He told her she was completely free to say no, that his gratitude would remain unchanged. Her hands trembled as she looked from the ring to his face. A flood of memories, doubts, and dormant hopes washed over her. She thought about the lonely years spent working, waiting, just surviving. She thought about trust, about patience, and the strange workings of destiny. She had to ask one question. Why her? After all this time, why choose her? His answer was immediate. Kindness, he said, builds a foundation far stronger than beauty or wealth ever could. You saw me when I was invisible to everyone else. That was it. That was the answer that unlocked everything. A smile broke through her tears. She said yes. Not because he was now a man of means, but because he was a man of gratitude, of honesty, a man whose core had remained beautifully unchanged. A wave of quiet applause rippled through the cafe as strangers smiled, witnesses to a real-life love story. The owner turned away, wiping his eyes, pretending it was just dust in the air. They didn't rush. They talked for hours, sharing stories, laughter, and comfortable silences, fitting together as if they were two long-lost pieces of the same puzzle. In the months that followed, their lives began to merge. He supported her dreams, and she grounded his ambition. Together, they built a life founded on something far more valuable than wealth. Their story spread not through headlines, but through whispers, a gentle reminder that kindness is never wasted. It simply waits, it grows, and eventually it returns. The promise was fulfilled, not as a fairy tale ending, but as a living lesson. The truest riches are gratitude, loyalty, and love. Thanks for watching.